All right, so we're talking about graphing square root graph. Okay, so graphing y equals x squared. So we're going to kind of start with the traditional sense, and then we'll kind of like take some shortcuts. But let's say I'm going to make a table, and let's say I'm going to pick some, classic numbers like -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and say 4. All right, so if I plug in -2, so if I do the square root of -2, we know that that's not a real number. You have a negative inside of the square root. So if you actually try to square root it in your calculator, it's going to tell you error, domain error, because there's not a real number that exists at -2. Well, if you do the same thing for -1, we know we get like we get an imaginary number, so we have error, like it can't be physically graphed on this coordinate plane. When I get to 0, the square root of 0 is 0. Well, I've got my first number in the table that I can actually plot. Then I do the square root of 1, and the square root of 1 is the number 1. Okay, sounds good. I can plot that one, 1, 1. The square root of 2, I believe, is a decimal. Square root of 2 is about, 1.4, so 1.4. So at 2, I'm at 1.4, so about there-ish. Square root of 3, that's 1.7. So, about there. Sounds good. And then the square root of 4 is the number 2. Nice whole number. And we can keep going and going, but basically the graph starts at 0 and it curves this way. And so this is what a square root graph looks like. Well, there's some things we can do because, no one wants to make a table for all these square root graphs. So we kind of come down to focusing on particular points that we could use that would be really easy to square root. So you notice that the square root of 0 gave us a nice whole number, the square root of 1 gives us a nice whole number, and the square root of 4 gives us a nice whole number. So as we're kind of going through some of the future problems, we're going to actually try to create this square root of 0, square root of 1, and square root of 4 to kind of just pick some key points on there to make this easier. All right, so we're going to go y equals the square root of x plus 4. So my kind of goal here is to get the key point, and the key point comes from here and here. So we asked ourselves the classic question that I've asked many times in this course before. What number plus 4 would equal 0? Once again, that's going to be what number plus 4 equals 0. This is what I'm asking. It would be -4. For the key point, that's the x part. And then I have my back value, the k value here. The value back here is going to be -3. So therefore, I have my first point, -4, -3. Now, on the previous slide, one of the nice values that gave me a whole number was a square root of 0. Right? So if I take that number -4 that we found and I plug it in, -4 plus 4 gives me 0. So there's that square root of 0 from the previous slide that would give me a whole number answer. So the square root of 0 is 0 minus 3. That would give me -3, which is exactly that number, which you can see will always come from that location in the equation. So when we write the key point, we're always finding that first square root of 0 number for us. But the next thing I want to try to figure out is I want to create a square root of 1. I want to create a square root of 1. So I go back to my problem and I kind of ask myself, okay, what number plus 4 would equal 1? Well, that would be -3. -3 plus 4 creates 1. So I have the square root of 1, and the square root of 1 is 1. Then I can minus my 3, I get negative 2. So I have another point at negative 3, comma, negative 2. The number that creates the square root of 1 for me, and then the result of the calculation. And so I have another point at negative 3, negative 2. Well, the last one that we talked about in the last slide was trying to create the square root of 4. So if I have square root some number plus 4 minus 3, I got to figure out, okay, what number can I plug in that if I added 4 would give me a 4? Well, that would be the number 0. 0 plus 4 is 4. So I'd have square root 4, then my minus 3. The square root of 4 is a nice whole number, 2. Minus 3 is negative 1. That means the other point that I need is 0, negative 1. And this is enough to have me create a graph for my square root. And so I just go ahead and I do that. And so my graph would look something like this. Once again, your graph always starts at your key point, which is what we have in red. And then we go ahead and get 2 more points. And really easy numbers to use are the ones that create whole numbers. So hence why I'm trying to create a square root of 1 by choosing my number, and create a square root of 4 when I choose my number, because they're going to give me nice whole numbers when I square root them. Let's take a look at another one. All right, problem 3. So we have a new equation they want us to graph, and the first thing we want to do is find the key point. And so we ask the age-old question, what number minus 5 would equal 0? Positive 5. Positive 5 minus 5 is equal to 0, so 5 is going to be the x part of our key point. Our back number is the 4, and so that's going to be the y value of our key point. So I'm going to plot that point on our graph. All right, and then we want to create 2 more points, and we're going to do that by trying to create a square root of 1 and then a square root of 4. So we go ahead and kind of set it up. We're trying to figure out some number minus 5 that would equal 1. So a number minus 5 that would equal 1 would be 6. 6 minus 5 is 1. So I would have square root 1 plus 4, and the square root of 1 is 1. Add 4, we get 5. So our next point is 6, comma 5. Once again, that number is going to be the x value for us. So 6, 5, so we'll have a point right here. Okay. And now we're going to try to create a square root of 4 so we can get another nice whole number coordinate. So square root some number minus 5 that would equal 4. I think 9. So 9 minus 5 would equal 4. And so the square root of 4 is 2. And 2 plus 4 is 6. So we would have 9, comma 6. We take the number that would fit into that space, and then we take our result for the y. So we have 9, comma 6. And then we start at our key point, and we draw our square root graph heading to the right. Yes, our square root graphs are always going to head to the right. All right, so our next one, we have y equals negative square root x plus 1 plus 1. So once again, our key point comes from here, and we ask the question, what number plus 1 is equal to 0? That's going to be negative 1, and then we take the back number, and that would be our y value. So we have negative 1, positive 1. From here, we want to go ahead and get our next point by trying to create the square root of 1 in our problem. So we have negative square root some number plus 1 will equal 1. So number plus 1 that would equal 1 would be 0. So we have negative square root of 1, then we have plus 1. The square root of 1 is 1. Don't forget your negative sign. Plus 1. So negative 1 plus 1 is 0. So our coordinate here is going to be 0, 0 for us. All right, and then we're going to try to create a square root of 4. So we have negative square root some number plus 1, and we have our plus 1 in the back. So now we're trying to figure out some number plus 1 that equals a 4. That would be a 3. So we would have negative square root 3 plus 1 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. Don't forget your negative sign. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. And so now we have 3 comma negative 1. Once again, we're going to start from our key point and then connect the points heading to the right. Now this time you'll notice that the graph is upside down, which it should be. And that's the reason why it should is because the equation started with a negative, so we're only seeing the bottom part of that whole parabola that we used to draw. So we only see, that's why it's upside down, because of the negative sign. Okay, our next problem, we have a negative square root x minus 3 plus 1. Once again, we are going to the idea of what number minus 3 is equal to 0. That would be positive 3. And whatever our back number is the y value. So we're going to have 3, 6. And now I'm going to try to create a square root of 1. So I get a nice whole number coordinate. So we have ourselves negative square root some number minus 3, and then plus 6. So we need to figure out some number minus 3 that equals 1. I think a 4 would work. So 4 minus 3 is 1, exactly what I'm trying to create here, plus a 6. The square root of 1 is 1. Don't forget your negative sign. And then negative 1 plus 6 is 5. So I have a coordinate that is 4, comma 5. So 4, comma 5 would be right here. And now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to try to create a square root of 4 this time. So I have negative square root some number minus 3 plus 6. So some number minus 3 that would equal a 4. 7. 7 take away 3 is 4. Okay, so that would work. So I'm going to have negative square root 4, because 7 take away 3 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2, and I don't forget your negative sign. I have plus 6, so that's going to give me a 4. So my coordinate is 7, comma 4. And so now I just go ahead, start at the key point, and then connect the dots, making it curve towards the right. And once again, the graph should be upside down because I had a negative sign in front of the problem. All right, our next problem, problem 6, is y equals 2 square root x minus 3. Once again, I am looking towards what's inside of the radical, and I'm asking the question, what number can I plug into x that would make it equal 0? Well, this time it would just be 0, because there's nothing else inside of the radical besides x. And then the back value here is a negative 3. So our first point, our key point is 0, negative 3. We still want to do the things we have done before. We want to try to create the square root of 1. So we have 2 square root some number minus 3. So if we want to create a 1 inside of our square root and there's nothing else inside the square root but the x, then we can just put the 1 itself. So the square root of 1 is 1. And since we have a number in front, they will get multiplied together. Remember, this really means 2 times the square root of 1. So 2 times 1 is 2, and we take away our 3, we get negative 1. So our next point is 1, comma, negative 1. It's going to be right here. Right, and then we have to try to create the square root of 4. So we have 2 square root some number, and then minus 3. And once again, since it's just an x and we want to create a 4, we can just put a 4. We can replace the x with 4. So the square root of 4 is 2. Don't forget your 2 in front. And they will get multiplied. So 2 times 2 is 4, minus 3. We get 1. So our coordinate is 4, comma 1. And now we can connect our points, starting with the key point and curving it towards the right. Okay, problem 8. We have y equals 0.5, the square root of x plus 2. And once again, we look here and ask ourselves the question, what number plus 2 would equal 0? It would be negative 2. We don't have a back number this time, so it will just be 0. So that's going to be our first point, negative 2 comma 0. And so now we can go ahead and ask ourselves the question. We're trying to create a square root of 1. So we got 0.5 square root some number plus 2. And we're kind of asking ourselves, all right, what number plus 2 would equal 1? That would be negative 1. Negative 1 plus 2 is 1. So we're going to have 0.5 square root 1. The square root of 1 is 1. Remember, that's going to get multiplied to the 0.5, which gives me 0.5. So I have a coordinate of negative 1, comma 0.5. So we'll just plot it the best we can. It should be about there. Then we're going to do the square root of 4. So we have 0.5 square root, some number plus 2. We want it to equal a 4. So we would obviously just say, well, we know 2 plus 2 is 4. So it should be a 2. That's going to give us square root 4. Don't forget your 0.5. The square root of 4 is 2. Remember, that's going to get times to the 0.5. And that's going to give us 1. So we have 4 comma 1. And then we can go ahead and graph our square root function. One more problem. All right, so here, once again, when we're looking, we can go ahead and ask the question, what number plus 3 would equal 0? That would be negative 3. The back number is a 1. And so now we have our key point. I'm going to put that in red. So we're at negative 3, positive 1. And then once again, we are trying to create the square root of 1. And so we have to go, what number plus 3 is going to equal a 1? So negative 2 would work. 3 take away 2 is 1. So we have 2 square root 1 plus 1. The square root of 1 is 1. Once again, that's going to get times by the 2. And so 2 times 1 is 2. Then we add 1, that's 3. So we have a coordinate of negative 2, 3. Then we have the square root of 4. So we're going to ask the question, what number plus 3 would equal 4? And so we would need a positive 1. So 1 plus 3 is 4. So we're going to have 2 square root 4 plus 1. The square root of 4 is 2. Remember, the 2 in front and the 2 we get from the square root of 4 will times together to make 4. We add 1, we get 5. So our coordinate is 1 comma 5. And now we connect our points, drawing the graph to the right.